Hi, welcome to the Nature of Databases and Data. And this recording assumes that you've done the homework, pre-lab up to page 158 in the fall 2014 lab manual. And it assumes that you currently have TBL class, employee training, and ratings. What we'll be doing is, in parts, in this first part, we'll go through what we went through in class up to a certain point, and then in part 2, we'll continue through making relationships. Okay, what we want to do first is make sure your Premier is opened and that you have your access files on the desktop, as you can see that I do. And by word of explanation, some of you may have noticed that there is a file that appears on your desktop, and this file has the extension LACCDB. That's a locking file, and essentially what it does is its presence makes sure that no one else can get into your Access database and make edits while you are. So as long as this file is here, nobody else can get into this database. So this is kind of important for networks and multi-user environments. If you still see it there, and you know your database is closed, what you may have done is opened it, or you've opened it off of a network and perhaps have lost network connectivity. And then sometimes you may find that when you try to open Premier or any Access database, it will tell you that it's been locked by an administrator, and you have no idea who did that. That's probably what happened. You can simply delete this file, reopen Premier, or reopen Premier and close Premier, and then that will trigger the deletion of this file. Anyway, back to work. What we want to do is start by importing some data, and we're going to start with importing TBL member, external data, and our file is in an Excel file called members.xlsx. I'm going to browse for it, select it, click open, and I want to import the source data into a new table in the current database. Because it's a closely compatible program, Excel tends to know, and Access tends to know, when there are column headings in the first row. Click Next. We want to keep our member ID as short text, but note that you can also go in and change things as you see fit. You see zip codes coming in as number. Remember the rule that if it's not going to be something you calculate with, then you should make it text. We'll do that later as we work through the designs, but until then, just know that it's available to do this when you actually import. We are not going to let Access add a primary key. We are going to choose our own, which happens to be member ID. Click Next. We're going to go by the standard naming convention so that we name objects with a prefix that tells us what they are, and a typical entity name is going to be called member singular, and click Finish. We don't need to save the import steps. We may do that later to demonstrate how we can make regular imports very convenient. Close. TBL member, you can right click and open in design view. Remember that when you did ratings, our member ID we alluded to this, was named as rated by in TBL ratings. Well, it's got to match our member ID and member. So it's going to be 30 characters. Make sure that it's also short text. Go back to Datasheet view. You can go to the upper left-hand corner on the Home tab. And your view to possible, we're in Design view. Let's go to Datasheet view. We want to save the table, and we're going to get a warning that says that we have changed the field size. Because Access always wants to protect your data, it's always going to warn you. So what could happen is if we changed it to a shorter number of characters, like 2, we would have lost significant information. So it always will warn you. We're okay. We know we're darn sure what we want to change. So let's click yes. Examine your data. Looks good. We'll be working more with how these things look and how they're treated by Access later. Close member. Next, we're going to create a new table from a text file. Bottom of page 159. We're going to import a text file from the External Data tab, Import and Link, and into a new table in the current database. This time, we're going to browse for a file called state_data.txt. Open, new table, click OK. And this looks a little bit different. As we discussed in class, it could be a fixed width or it could be a delimited file. But we know from the directions that it's a tab delimited file, and so we should click Next. You must tell it in this case that the first row contains field names. So be sure to click that. Otherwise, this is going to import as one part of the data, which is going to be a problem. Click Next. Nothing we need to do here. Click Next. Choose your own primary key. Our choices are Store in State, Shipping and Handling, Sales Tax, and State Abbrev. State Abbrev is going to be our unique key. So we'll click Next. And we're going to save this as TBL taxes _ shipping _ fees. Click Finish and do not save the steps. So those are the simplest ways to import data. What we're going to do now is we're going to go outside of Access and we're going to open an Excel file and get some data from a website. As I mentioned in class, it's possible to grab data from websites that have stored their data in HTML tables or in some other accessible format, such as a web page based on an Excel file. So I'm going to make sure I'm clicked in cell A1. And what I'm going to do is go up to Data. And we've got an external data group. And I'm going to choose From Web. Note the other two options, well, 3 actually, from text, from Access, and from other sources. We can explore those later, but they are available. When I click From Web, I get a new web query window, and what you're going to see here is an internal browser. So what I'd like you to do is go up and type https://www.indiana.edu /busk204 more underscore ratings.htm. This is a file that I saved from an Excel file as a web page, so it's going to look very similar to what you see. So we're going to click Go, and that should take us to that page. And you can see it looks kind of like an Excel spreadsheet. It's got sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. If you happen to go exploring and you're looking at what's on all the sheets, you may find that there are things not appropriate to import. But on sheet 2, there's all our data. Our 6-digit item code, our rated by field, and our rating. However, you may notice that we used to have these little arrows sitting next to places where we could find tabular data to import. No more. So what we're going to have to do is refresh. There's a refresh button up here at the top in this little rudimentary browser. So click refresh, and we'll get our arrows back. So right next to item code here, click this, and that will select the data that we wish to import. And then click import, and notice that when we do, our cell is highlighted here. And when I click import data, watch, we get a web query happening. Okay, and then luckily, we have a named range called sheet 002. Unfortunately, we have run into a typical problem with Excel, and that is that it truncates initial zeros when it thinks it's importing a number in that text. So now this is stored as a general, which it interprets in this case as a number. So what we're going to do is we're going to cleanse the data, as we did in class. I'm going to simply append a whole bunch of zeros to the front of these numbers using an ampersand. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to have far more than I need, but I do know from my data that all item codes are exactly 6 characters long, and that I've only lost zeros at the beginnings, so I'm going to make sure that all the zeros are put back. Once I do that, I have too many zeros, so as we talked about in class, I can use one of the text functions, namely write, to only grab the last 6 characters from the string. And there we go. Double click, and as usual, we want to copy and paste values, so clipboard 1, 2, 3, over there on the left, to make sure that we actually have everything in there as values rather than getting a little bit risky with this stuff over here. And then I want to make absolutely certain that Excel believes this is text so that when I import it, everything will be okay. I'm going to save this into my Access folder as a regular workbook, so XLSX, and I'm going to save it as web ratings. And click Save. We'll go back to Premiere. And what we want to do is take that data and append it to an existing table this time. So once again, go to External Data in Excel. But this time, what we want to do is find that web ratings file that we just created. Click Open, and append a copy to the table Ratings. one of the issues we have is that we see that we've got extra data on the right. But luckily, as I showed you before, we actually have a named range that takes that data away. So this is the only data that will be imported. Click Next. It detected that first row contains column headings, which is good. Click Next. And import to table TBL ratings. And then click Finish. Once again, don't save steps. Open up ratings, and you'll notice that everything's in good order. Everything is 6 characters, and we should have 1,452 records in here. Check Design View. We still have a composite key, and our field sizes are maintained. This will be the end of part 1. We'll continue with the normalization section in part 2.